Hello everyone and welcome to this video, which is in our Reengineering the Chess Classic series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we are going to take a look at a really lovely game between Frank Marshall and Carl Schlechter, Ostend 1907. Now this series is mainly about the great Austro-Hungarian player Carl Schlechter, but this actually features a win by the equally great US player Frank Marshall. And it's a little bit of a blast from the past for me, jeugdsentiment, they'd say in Dutch, because I first saw this game in a book by Ray Keene, very good book actually, an aggressive opening repertoire for white, or an attacking opening repertoire for white, that really helped me develop a very nice 1d4 repertory when I was little. And he recommended this very unusual 6-bishop g5 system against the Tarrasch, and this was a particular speciality of Frank Marshall. And Marshall was an interesting player, you know. Rather variable as many players from that era, but he actually came up with a lot of very interesting opening ideas in 1d4, and this is definitely one of them. So let's have a look how this went. It comes from a Tarrasch, so d4 d5, c4 e6, knight c3 c5, takes. Now Marshall also played the very sharp 5 e4, which is also very much his style, but knight f3, knight c6, and now instead of the Schlechter Rubinstein plan of 6g3, which has really become the main line nowadays, he played the move bishop g5, and actually for a long time, I played the Tarrasch for quite a while, quite successfully actually, but for a long time I was rather irritated by this line. Also by the slightly related line knight f3, c5, takes, bishop g5 as well, which I think is actually an even slightly better way of reaching this. The point was that I was actually quite afraid of the lines that came up in the game. Not afraid in the sense of petrified, but really feeling, well, how on earth am I going to win this? So actually in this position I spent a lot of time analysing the move f6, which is pretty interesting. The idea actually is that if you play the natural bishop f4, which looks reasonable, right? I mean, bishop g5, you force this horrific move f6, and you're just going to develop naturally with e3, bishop e2. Then you've got this very sharp idea, g4, knight d2, c takes d4, knight b5, king f7. And yeah, actually this is just very, very sharp indeed. I mean, my biggest problem when I analysed this with black, this was still in the time I was analysing really not very much with an engine, was trying to make knight c7, rook b8, knight b5, turn that into some sort of winning attempt for black, because of course that's what I want. I wanted to be able to have winning chances with every opening I played. Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very interesting idea. Probably the best line is just to play bishop c1 in actual fact, but this is the main engine line, bishop e6, e3, and then c4. We're going to see that more often. And then, this is a game stockfish against dragon, takes, king takes, b takes, c6, but I'm pretty happy with this as black from the opening. You know, slightly weak pawns, but 2 bishops. Yeah, why not? I mean, happy to play this. But actually the engines point out that, bishop e7 is the natural move, is a good move. And after takes, e3, this is what Marshall played. I think he also played d takes c5 at times, and this is also what dragon prefers. But after d4, knight e4 castles, black's going to play queen d5. He's going to get back that c5 pawn, and actually it's a pretty decent position for black. So this is quite nice. But after e3, instead of Schlechter's castles, which allows white to get exactly what he wants, this was really why Ray Keene recommended this. Actually, what the engines point out is this move c4. Now, this move c4, now when I grew up, this was really always pointed out as terrible mistake, releasing the central pressure, the central tension here, giving white a free hand in the center. Terrible move, and that's pretty much how I grew up really. But the point is about this this move c4 is that, it does have some positive things. It gains queenside space. And very, very much the point is that, if white really does try and play a move like e4 and try and break things open, why is this so bad for black necessarily? We've just got an isolated pawn here. Okay, we've got to defend this one, but this isolated pawn, the fact you get this d5 square for your pieces, it's not bad at all. And actually C4, early C4 systems, these were the basis of the repertoire that Argard and Tierlis recommended in their excellent book on the Tarrasch defense for quality chess. And this is exactly what the engines recommend. After C4, the engines already think that black has a slight edge. Just shows somehow. So bishop e2, various ideas. Rook b8 is what Dragon played. b3, b5, takes, castles, bishop f5, rook e1, castles, rook c1, and rook c8, a bit mysterious, not quite sure why that one. The other idea, actually, which I preferred, which in the end I actually prepared as well, this is Stockfish's idea, is just to go castles, and then just b5, straight away, no preparation. If knight b5, then we just pick up the pawn like that. And there's nothing wrong with this position at all, although this is quite interesting and sharp. But we're threatening stuff like bishop d3, this rook is misplaced. There's some sharp lines that you can try. You don't have to play like this, of course, but basically black's doing pretty well in this position. Just with this early c4, it's just one of those ways in which strategically engines enrich your game, because it's these sort of things were rejected out of hand. And of course, the reason for rejecting them is not stupid. It is true that if you release tension in the center, you give white a free hand on the other side, so it's risky positionally. But it can also just be a good approach, balancing up the risks. It can also be a good approach in terms of getting your queenside play going. And there's many other lines like this where this sort of stuff has turned out to be much better than you'd think. So, but anyway, Schlechter played castles, and now after d takes c5, Marshall very sharp on that, doing it the first possible good moment. Well, what have we got in this position? We're simply going to get a typical isolated queen's pawn position here, where black has got isolated queen's pawn, and actually white has managed to exchange off the dark squared bishops, which is good in two ways. I mean, the squares around the d pawn are now no longer covered by a dark squared bishop, and secondly, exchanging off that dark squared bishop makes an attack against the white king side virtually, impossible, very, very, very unlikely. So basically, white's got the advantage of targeting an isolated queen's pawn and none of the disadvantages, basically. And it's these things are quite funny. Sometimes you play these systems as white, and you sort of think, I'm just playing for a tiny nibble here, a tiny little edge. It's so boring. And other times you sort of think, what a lovely position, no risk, great advantage. Doesn't my opponent look unhappy? And that's often depends on your mood, actually, how you assess these positions. But I mean, the engines are saying something between 0.6 and 0.7 for white, so vaguely serious advantage here. So queen a5 played, and now Marshall played an interesting idea. I mean, my natural move would be just to play the bishop to e2. That development looks natural to me. The engines want bishop b5, actually, which is quite interesting, to transform actually that isolated pawn into what Nimzowitsch called the isolated pawn couple, c6 d5, and then you can play something like castles. Bishop g4 is possible. This is an amazing little line from Stockfish. Queen d4, knight d4, when white's got actually a very nice position here. These knights are beautiful, attacking the pawn on c6. And we're just going to go rook b1 and try and invade. It's a very nice position for white. I mean, Dragon managed to defend it, but it's not too cool. What white can also do, I think this was Dragon's idea, is just go queen d4, queen d2, rook c1, queen e7, castles, and knight a4, and lovely pressure on here. Maybe you'll go knight d4. You're just going to have a good knight against bad bishop position. Again, the engines managed to defend this. For humans, these are not nice positions to defend. You can easily go wrong in these. So that is actually a good idea. Marshall's bishop d3. slightly, it feels wrong somehow to, when you've got a d pawn that could advance, to put the bishop in front of it somehow. I'd like to have my queen, you know, attacking it and also covering the d4 square. The idea, of course, there's, you know, some little tricks, you know, as always with Marshall, that we've got little ideas like here. So actually he wants to stop bishop g4, which is fair enough, you know, I mean, and he also wants to try and dissuade bishop f5. So it's certainly not a stupid move by any means. Just feels, you know, to me a little bit unnatural, that's all. So queen c5 played, castles, bishop e6. Yeah, the engines want something a bit more active. They want you to start looking at rook d8 and try to get in d4 quickly. They don't feel that that's too bad for black. But, you know, this is actually the point. You know, Schlechter played quite normally and reasonably, but that actually, you know, just gave Marshall really very nice control over the position. You know, I mean, that's just the thing. So, yeah, White's opening has worked beautifully. I mean, you just need to know a few variations, and that's your whole line against the Tarrasch. Pretty good. So rook c1, queen b6 played. Again, you know, the engines are looking at stuff like rook d8 and knight g6, and then bring the queen back to e7, and, you know, look for d4, look for bishop g4, look for knight e5. A little bit more active somehow. After queen b6, yeah, in some ways a little bit strange. The queen gets hit with knight a4. Queen b4. And now Marshall actually set a fantastic trap here. He played h3. Which just seems to be stopping bishop g4, but might also be stopping something else coming to g4. Because Schlechter was rather careless with h6. In principle, not such a bad move, stopping knight g5. But here, maybe stop your the video and see whether you can spot the tactic that that Marshall missed. Amazing, eh? Because Marshall was really, really tricky tactician. I'm amazed he missed this. But White actually has rook c5, trapping the black queen. And just threatening a3, winning the black queen. Just, yeah, beautiful. What can you say? It just all works. So yeah, I mean, that would have been very, very nice indeed. But we would have missed you know, a very nice finish to the game. But that was I think it was pointed out by contemporary sources. I think that Ray also pointed it out as well. So yeah, after h6, well, Marshall played a3. Queen d6 and knight c5. Very nice positional. And well, you can already see the engines are saying this is plus 0.4, 0.5, something like that. But, you know, for human players, it's just not very nice. You know, it's just because, you know, something like b6 is natural. I mean, Schlechter played rook b8, but I find this a very strange move. I mean, what do you think? You know, do you think that you're going to be able to tolerate a knight on c5 forever like this? Of course not. You're going to have to play b6. Sorry, you're going to have to play b6 at some stage. So, you know, I mean, it's just, yeah, you know, I mean, you might as well play it immediately, you know, unless you've got a super bright idea. I think, to be honest, that Schlechter's idea was to move the bishop out of the way somewhere, like f5, and then play b6 after. But even that I'm not very convinced by. You know, the engines want takes. But okay, I mean, we go queen a4 to g4, which is a very nice move. Targeting those light squares. We're going to play rook d1. We're going to play e4. Yeah, I mean, you know, I'd be thinking I've got a clear advantage as White. The engines don't think that, but I would be, you know, very, very happy with White to get this position. So, yeah, I mean, I think things are already getting a little bit tricky for human players here. So rook b8 played, and now queen e2 from Marshall. Actually, the engines quite like this flexible move, rook c2. You know, maybe looking to play a move like b4 and queen a1 or rook d2, you know, something like that. They also like the move b4 a lot, which is very natural, just, you know, stamping that knight into c5. Marshall played queen e2, which is a very typical Marshall move. He's looking for rook d1 actually and e4. You know, it's active somehow. You know, he was always a very active d4 player. You know, there are some that play d4 quite positionally. There are others, like me, I think, in actual fact, you know, much more likely to play a plan like this, like Marshall played. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's, you know, it's maybe not the very best engine move, but it's a good move. You know, you wouldn't if a young player, you know, wanted to find a good move in this position, this would be a very good looking move to play. So bishop f5 was played by Schlechter. The engines don't like that at all. Dynamically it's a little bit risky. Takes and rook d1. And obviously, you know, we're attacking this d5 pawn, and we've also got this threat of e4. And yeah, I mean, now black does have to be, you know, start being rather careful. Obviously, he's exchanged off a lot of minor pieces, so you know, it's not like you know, everything's bad in the position. But yeah, the chances of losing a pawn or getting into a bit of a tangle are pretty high. And well, that's what happens to Schlechter. Rook e8 was what the engines wanted. You know, just slow down the old e4 advance, and you know, just try and make sure that, that, for example, the queen can get out to g6. Why is that? Why do you need a rook moving to e8 to allow that? Well, you don't want to allow a fork of rook on f8 and b8 with knight d7. So yeah, rook e8, maybe knight comes back to e7 to defend d5, and then the queen can swing over. Should be still holdable for black. But knight e7 was played by Schlechter, e4 followed. And now, yeah, now the engines are looking for all sorts of defences. Rook d8 is quite natural, e5, queen g6. This was played by Stockfish. And I like this plan. I mean, it's not comfortable, but we've got the rook defending the d-pawn, and the queen is sort of hanging around the king's side, just to stop any, you know, sort of any knights coming around or doing stuff. You know, that feels like the best thing somehow. What Schlechter does is really passive. So after he plays b6, and now Marshall plays e5, and well, this is the big problem now. You can't keep the queen active because knight d7 forks these two. So Schlechter has to go back to d8, and you know, even though there's nothing catastrophic happening yet, every time, you know, the way Schlecter's playing with slightly imprecise moves all the time, you know, he's always just sort of you're getting a slightly worse version of everything, and eventually, you know, those things add up, and suddenly tactics are working, you know. And but actually, Marshall's move knight e4, which to me looks like a good-looking move, is not at all liked by the engines. They wanted to play the move knight d3, queen d7 and knight f4, and basically line up on this one and also have the idea of e6, and that's a clear advantage to white. But still, you know, I mean, black is still, you know, still with a chance of surviving. I mean, we're going to play rooks to c8, to d8. We'll try and get our queen out to f5, you know, and well, we're a bit slower than we needed to be, but it's not terrible yet. But after knight e4, you know, obviously Frank Marshall, again, super active, looking for stuff, looking for dangerous stuff. And here, Schlechter plays a really strange move, I have to say, a move I can't really place. He was an excellent defender, but he plays the move queen c8, which looks wrong on every single level. I mean, okay, you're threatening d takes e4, but this self-pin, yeah, feels really, really awkward. I think, ironically, he was probably thinking that if I go queen d7, then maybe, you know, white will play a move like knight f6 check, and I'll have to take it off, you know. But the queen is way better placed on d7 than on c8. I mean, obviously he wanted to force white to play, you know, to move the knight by threatening to play d takes c4 with the queen on c8. But again, you know, you're playing queen e6 next move, so what can white do in this time? You know, it doesn't really make sense what Schlechter does. Because now after queen c8, Marshall did play knight f6. I remember this game, you know, I remember the diagrams, thinking, being so impressed with this game. What can you do? Well, I mean, king h8 is possible, but then we get something very similar, just queen d3. Takes. Pretty much the same, basically, as the game. So g takes f6 played, e takes f6. And now what do you do? The engines want you to play queen e6 in this position, go for the exchange of queens. But this is a very unpleasant position. I mean, we've got all sorts of things. You could go rook c7. The engines like rook e1 followed by knight d4, just putting pressure on this one first and then following up with rook c7. It's a horrific endgame, but it's probably the best that black has got here. Because Schlechter went knight g6, and now this very nice move queen d2. It might well be this move, maybe, that Schlechter missed. It's got a very nice double threat, queen takes h6, and also just simply queen takes d5, followed by picking up the knight. I mean, white's got a pawn already. He's going to take another d pawn and then take the knight on c6. So I mean, king h7, we just go queen takes d5 and end of story. Just 2 pawns up after we win the knight on c6. So queen f5 was played by Schlechter, and a move like rook c6 is possible, of course, but Marshall went for the slightly flashier queen h6 and rook takes c6. Because if queen takes c6, we go knight g5, and queen h7 is going to be made. So queen b2 was played by Schlechter. He didn't fancy going for a bad ending with queen g7. I mean, we could take the queen to go rook d5 if we wanted, or we could just play queen c1 and keep the attack, whatever you like. But after queen takes b2, rook d4 was played by Marshall, and we're just cutting off the retreat of the queen now. So knight g5 is a threat, rook takes g6 is a threat. Schlechter played here in queen f5, desperately trying to get the queen back, but after rook g4 he resigned because, well, there's nothing you can do against rook g6, and then, well, either mate or crushing material advantage. So there we are. I thought that was, again, it's a blast from the past, a game I was very impressed with when I was young. Interesting system against the Tarrasch. I think also shows that, you know, in a lot of these systems, and it applies not only to this, but to a lot of white systems, it's always the case that, you know, you're aiming for a certain structure, and I always feel that black has a moment of opportunity, maybe one, maybe two, where there's something that you can do to avoid giving white what he wants. You know, here it's f6, or probably an even better way is the engine's c4. And that's really, you know, that's always really important. If you miss that moment, then white gets his pleasant structure, and then with black you're often struggling or, you know, or missing counterplay. So I think that's a very important lesson. And yeah, I mean, I thought the game was very interesting. Schlechter didn't play particularly well in this game, but I did, you know, the that jump knight f6 is something I like an awful lot. It brings back nice youthful memories. So there we are. Hope you enjoyed that. If you liked the video, why not give a like, subscribe to the channel, take a look at my new books, Silicon Road for Chess Improvement, and also Reengineering the Chess Classics. And well, you know, otherwise, you know, thanks very much for watching, and hope to see you at the next videos. Thanks for watching.